You're sitting at your desk. Maybe it's a Tuesday afternoon. Maybe it's late at night after everyone else has gone to bed. And you're just staring, not at anything in particular. Maybe the clock on your computer, maybe the window, maybe nothing. And somewhere in that stillness, this thought creeps in, quiet at first, then louder. Is this it? You're in your 30s. You have a job, maybe a decent one. Maybe a relationship. Maybe a place to live that's fine. Everything looks okay from the outside. But inside there's this weight. This low-grade hum of dissatisfaction that you can't quite name. You had plans. Big ones. Or maybe they weren't even that big. They were just yours. The career you'd be proud of by now. The version of yourself you thought you'd become. The life you assumed would click into place. And somewhere along the way, time started moving differently. The years stopped feeling long. 30 came. Then maybe 33, 36. And now you're doing this math in your head. How many good years are left? And the answer scares you more than you want to admit. You're not depressed. At least you don't think so. You still get up, still go through the motions, still do what you're supposed to do. But there's this nagging fear underneath all of it. A fear that you've wasted something, that you've somehow missed your window, that the people around you are living their lives while you've been standing still. If any of that resonates, if even a small part of that feels familiar, then I want you to know something before we go any further. You are not broken. You are not behind. And you are not alone. In this video, we're going to talk about what's actually happening when men in their 30s feel this way. We're going to name it, understand it, and then, most importantly, talk about what you can actually do with it. Not a 5-step plan. Not a productivity hack. Something more honest than that. So stick with me. Here's what I want to give you in the next 20 minutes or so. First, I want to help you understand why this is happening. Because right now, a lot of men in their 30s are carrying this feeling of being stuck, of time slipping away, and they have no framework for it. They just feel it and they suffer through it alone. I want to change that. Second, I want to show you that what you're feeling isn't a character flaw. It isn't laziness. It isn't weakness. There are real, well-documented psychological reasons this happens to men at this stage of life. And when you understand those reasons, something shifts. And third, I want to offer you a different way of thinking about this moment in your life. Not toxic positivity. Not just believe in yourself. Something more grounded than that. Because here's what I've come to believe. The fear of wasted time, as painful as it is actually pointing towards something. It's not a sign that you're losing. It might be the signal that you're finally ready to start. Let's get into it. Let me start with something that might actually surprise you. What you're feeling, this fear, this restlessness, this sense of time running out, it's not a personal failure. It's practically universal. A study published in the Journal of Men's Health found that men in their 30s consistently report higher levels of existential anxiety than at almost any other period in their lives. Not their 50s, not retirement, their 30s, right now, right where you are. A separate survey by the American Psychological Association found that roughly 60% of men between the ages of 30 and 40 report significant dissatisfaction with at least one major area of their lives, most commonly their career, their sense of purpose, or their personal relationships. And a 2021 global well-being study found that life satisfaction for men actually dips sharply in the 30s, bottoming out somewhere around 34 to 37, before slowly recovering in the mid-40s for most people. There's even a term researchers use for this, the happiness U-curve. Satisfaction tends to be high in your 20s when everything is still open and possible. It dips through the 30s, when reality sets in and the gap between expectation and experience gets painfully visible. And then, for most people who do the work, it begins to climb again. You're in the dip. That doesn't make it easy, but it does mean you're not uniquely broken. You're on a very human curve. What's less talked about, and what I think matters more, is why this dip happens. Not just statistically, but psychologically. What's actually going on inside you? That's where it gets interesting. There are 3 things I keep coming back to when I think about why men in their 30s feel stuck. 3 psychological patterns that almost everyone in this age group runs into, even if they never have the language for them. 'Cause number 1, the contract nobody signed, unrealistic expectations. From the time we were kids, we absorbed a very specific timeline. Graduate school, get a job, build your career. By 30, have your life together. By 35, be established. Know what you're doing. Be someone. It wasn't written anywhere explicitly. It was in the movies you watched, the things your parents said, the comparisons your teachers made, the culture that surrounded you. And without realizing it, you internalized that timeline like a contract. The problem is, nobody asked if you agreed to it. And now you're 30-something, and you're measuring yourself against a timeline that was never yours to begin with, built on someone else's assumptions about what a good life looks like, calibrated to an economy that no longer exists, a world that's changed dramatically, and expectations that were arbitrary to begin with. When reality doesn't match that imagined contract, the mind reads it as failure, even when it isn't. This is why so many men in their 30s describe feeling behind. Not because they've objectively failed to achieve things, but because they're comparing their actual life to a fictional one they were sold a long time ago. The first step out of this trap is recognizing that the timeline was always a fiction. You didn't miss a deadline. There was never a real deadline. There was just a story, and you can choose to stop organizing your life around it. Cause number 2, the comparison spiral, social reference, and the algorithm of envy. The second cause is comparison. And I want to be careful here because this one is real and it's gotten significantly worse in the last decade. Humans have always compared themselves to others. It's wired into us. It's how we calibrate. It's how we understand where we stand. But for most of human history, you compared yourself to the people immediately around you. Your neighbors, your colleagues, the people in your town. Now, you're comparing yourself to a curated, edited, filtered version of everyone you've ever met, plus thousands of strangers who have every incentive to show you only their wins. You see your college roommate's promotion announcement, your cousin's new house, the guy you vaguely knew from uni who is apparently running a successful business now. And every one of those images lands in your nervous system as data. They're ahead, I'm behind. The problem is, you're comparing your internal experience to their external highlight reel. You know all your doubts, your setbacks, your quiet moments of failure. You see their wins, and you draw the worst possible conclusion, that they have it figured out and you don't. Research on what psychologists call social comparison theory consistently shows that upward comparison, comparing yourself to people who seem to be doing better, is one of the most reliable ways to erode well-being. And men in their 30s are doing it constantly, often without even noticing. The comparison spiral is particularly painful because it robs you of something precious. the ability to assess your own life on its own terms. When you're always measuring yourself against someone else's metrics, you stop asking the question that actually matters. What does a good life look like for me? Cause number 3, the body's reminder, the first signals of aging. The third cause is one that doesn't get talked about enough, probably because men are expected to just shrug it off. Sometime in your early to mid-30s, your body starts doing things it didn't used to do. Recovery takes longer. You notice things changing, your energy, your weight, the way you feel in the morning. Maybe you start noticing you're the oldest person in certain rooms, or that you relate less naturally to people who are 22. For most men, these are small things, but psychologically, they carry a much bigger message. Time is actually passing. And that's where the existential weight comes in. Not because aging is bad, but because these physical signals make the abstract suddenly concrete. You can no longer pretend that time is unlimited. The clock becomes visible in a way it wasn't before. This is what psychologists call mortality salience. The moment when we stop thinking of death and aging as something that happens to other people and start reckoning with our own finitude. That sounds heavy. And honestly, it is. But it's also one of the most clarifying experiences a person can have, if they're willing to sit with it rather than run from it. Because when you really feel that your time is finite, something shifts. Things that didn't matter become obvious. Things you've been putting off start feeling urgent. The question, what do I actually want, stops being something you can defer. The fear of wasted time isn't just anxiety. It's a signal from a deeper part of you that's waking up. I want to stay here for a moment, because I think if you've made it this far, there's more going on beneath the surface than just feeling stuck. Let's name some of the harder feelings. There's regret, the paths not taken, the opportunities you passed on because you weren't ready, or you were afraid, or you just didn't know what you wanted. And now you look back and you wonder, what if? What if I'd made different choices at 24? At 28? What would my life look like now? There's grief too, and I mean that seriously. When you realize that certain versions of your future are no longer available to you, the career you didn't pursue, the years you didn't take to travel, the relationship you let go, there's a genuine loss there. And most men are never given permission to grieve it. There's the fear of stagnation. The nightmare scenario isn't dramatic failure. It's quiet, slow sameness. Looking up in 10 years and finding yourself exactly where you are now. Nothing having changed. The same routines, the same dissatisfactions, the same ceiling. And underneath all of it, often there's shame. The feeling that you should have this figured out by now. That other men do. That needing to have this conversation at all is somehow embarrassing. I want to say something about that shame directly. It is lying to you. The men who seem like they have everything figured out, who project certainty and contentment, most of them are running their own version of this internal conversation. The ones who look settled on the outside are often the ones who stopped questioning, who found a comfortable enough life and decided not to look too hard at whether it's actually what they want. The discomfort you're feeling, that's not a sign of failure. It's a sign of honesty, of paying attention, of still caring about the answer to that hard question. Is this the life I want to be living? That question is not a burden. It's a gift, an uncomfortable, inconvenient, sometimes painful gift, but a gift. Here's what I want to offer you now. Not a solution. I don't think solutions are what this needs, but a reframe. What if the feeling of being stuck is not the problem? What if it's the beginning of something? Think about it this way. The fact that you feel this weight, the fear, the restlessness, the dissatisfaction, means something important. It means you haven't settled. It means some part of you is still reaching for something more aligned with who you actually are. That's not nothing. In fact, that's everything. The men who genuinely waste their lives are not the ones who feel stuck in their 30s. They're the ones who stop feeling, who numb it out with enough busyness, enough distraction, enough routine that the question goes quiet. Not because they answered it, but because they gave up asking. You haven't given up. The psychological literature on what researchers call post-traumatic growth, and I'd extend it to post-disillusionment growth, consistently shows that periods of intense questioning, even suffering, often precede significant personal development. Not always. It requires engagement, not just suffering. But the disruption is frequently what makes the growth possible. Your 30s are not your ceiling. They are, for many men, the real beginning. The first decade where you have enough life experience to know what matters and enough runway to actually build toward it. That's not a consolation prize. That's a real advantage. Now, here's where I want to be practical without being prescriptive. I'm not going to give you a 5-step morning routine. I'm not going to tell you to wake up at 5 a.m. and journal and meditate and you'll be fine. That's not what this is. What I will say is this: the path forward almost always starts with one thing: honest self-assessment. Not self-criticism, that's different. Self-criticism is about judgment. Self-assessment is about curiosity. Starts with asking, what do I actually want? Not what should I want? Not what would look impressive to other people. What do I, specifically, with my particular nature and history and values, what do I actually want my life to look like? Most men in their 30s have never sat still long enough to answer that question clearly. Because it's uncomfortable. Because the answer might require change. Because it means taking responsibility for the shape of your life going forward. But that discomfort is the doorway. The fear of wasted time is not evidence that you've failed. It's your mind telling you that you still care. That you're not done. That there's more. And if there's more, then the next step is to start moving toward it. Not dramatically, not with a grand overhaul, but with one honest decision at a time, made by someone who knows themselves a little better than they did before. You're not stuck because you're failing. You're at a turning point, and turning points, by definition, require you to actually turn. I want to close this out simply. If something in this video landed, if a particular idea or feeling resonated with you, I'd really like to hear about it. Not because I need the engagement, but because I think men in their 30s don't talk to each other about this stuff nearly enough. We're really good at showing each other that we're fine. We're not always good at being honest about what's actually going on underneath. So if you want to leave a comment, it doesn't have to be profound. You can just say what hit home for you, or where you're at right now, or the one thing you've been telling yourself is fine but maybe isn't. And if you're not ready to do that publicly, that's okay too. But I'd at least encourage you to take 5 minutes after this. Sit quietly and ask yourself, what is the fear of wasted time actually trying to tell me? Not to panic, not to spiral, just to listen. Because that answer, quiet and specific and yours, is worth more than any advice I could give you. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next one.